In the high desert of northeastern Utah, there's a 500-acre stretch of land that looks, from the road, like nothing at all. Flat scrubland, a modest ranch house, a few outbuildings, cattle fencing. And yet this single piece of property has, at various points over the last 30 years, been purchased by a billionaire, studied under a classified Pentagon program, and investigated by a rotating cast of physicists, engineers, and military-trained scientists who arrived skeptical and, in more than one documented case, left the property changed. This is Skinwalker Ranch, and for the first time in decades, some of the scientists who actually worked there under government contract are now speaking publicly about what they encountered. Stay until the end, because what they describe is not a ghost story. It is a list of unresolved data. Let's start with the basic facts, because they matter more here than in almost any other mystery story you will ever hear, for one simple reason. This is one of the only cases of this kind where an actual funded classified United States government program was built specifically to study it. The ranch sits in Utah's Uinta Basin, an area already known among geologists for unusual natural gas seepage and complex underground mineral deposits. In 1996, the property was purchased by the National Institute for Discovery Science, a research organization founded by aerospace and hotel entrepreneur Robert Bigelow, specifically so that a team of scientists could live on site and document whatever was happening there using real instrumentation, cameras, magnetometers, radiation detectors, motion sensors, rather than relying on secondhand stories. That alone should tell you something. Nobody spends years funding a full-time scientific research team to sit on empty land unless something happening there had already caught serious attention. What had caught that attention was decades, arguably centuries, of reports. The land itself carries deep significance in Native American tradition long before any modern researcher set foot on it. In Navajo belief, a skinwalker is a malevolent figure, a witch capable of transforming into animal form, and among the Ute and neighboring tribes, this specific stretch of the Uinta Basin has long been described as a place to avoid, land where something does not want people settling. It's worth being direct and respectful here. This is a real, serious element of indigenous spiritual tradition, not folklore invented for entertainment, and many Native communities have expressed real discomfort with how casually this concept gets used in popular media. Whatever your view on the paranormal claims that follow, that cultural context deserves to be treated with weight, not treated as a punchline. By the time the ranch changed hands into modern ownership in the 1990s, the family living there at the time had already compiled an extensive list of things they said they witnessed, and, in many cases, filmed or photographed. Cattle found dead with injuries that veterinarians on site described as surgically precise, with no blood at the scene despite the wounds, a phenomenon known more broadly as cattle mutilation, which has been reported across ranches in the American West for decades, and for which no fully agreed-upon explanation exists, even among veterinary pathologists who have studied it seriously. Unexplained lights moving across the property at night in patterns that witnesses described as not matching aircraft, drones, or any known vehicle. Large animal tracks appeared in freshly fallen snow that simply stopped mid-stride, with no trail leading away, as though whatever made them had lifted straight up or vanished. Family members reported a persistent sense of being watched, sometimes accompanied by a physical pressure or unease strong enough that they described specific areas of the property they refused to enter after dark. It is important to be honest about what category these specific reports fall into. They are witness testimony, not independently verified data. No controlled scientific study has confirmed the mutilation cases or the light sightings as anything other than what individual witnesses described. But what makes Skinwalker Ranch different from almost every other haunted location story is what happened next. Because instead of staying in the realm of personal testimony, this became the subject of an actual, funded, methodical scientific investigation. And that investigation is where the story stops being folklore and starts becoming documented history. When the National Institute for Discovery Science took over the property, the team brought in included physicists, a biochemist, and former military and intelligence personnel who had experience running controlled experiments in demanding field conditions. This was not a ghost hunting show with handheld cameras and dramatic music. It was closer to a stakeout with scientific equipment. Infrared cameras running continuously across the property, magnetometers designed to detect changes in the local magnetic field, radiation detectors, and motion-triggered recording systems set up at multiple points simultaneously so that any event could, in theory, be captured from more than one angle at once. According to accounts later published by members of that team, including a book written by one of the lead researchers documenting the Institute's findings, the team did record a number of anomalies over their years on site, sudden, brief spikes in magnetic field readings with no identifiable source nearby, equipment failures that occurred simultaneously across multiple independent devices, and footage of lights and moving objects that the team was unable to conclusively identify or explain using conventional aircraft, wildlife, or atmospheric phenomena as an explanation. Here is where it is critical to separate two very different things, because a lot of retellings of this story blur them together. Some of what was recorded has a plausible conventional explanation that the researchers themselves acknowledged. Ball lightning and rare atmospheric electrical phenomena, known to occur in certain geological conditions, can produce glowing lights that behave in ways that look deeply strange to an untrained eye. The Uinta Basin's unusual underground gas and mineral composition could plausibly contribute to localized electromagnetic anomalies that would explain some of the equipment malfunctions. Distant aircraft, atmospheric refraction, and simple misidentification account for a meaningful share of unexplained light reports in any remote area, not just this one. Responsible members of the original research team have said this openly, that a portion of what gets discussed online as Skinwalker phenomena likely has a mundane, if unusual, natural explanation. What they have also said, consistently, is that a smaller number of specific recorded events did not fit any explanation they could construct, even after ruling out equipment error, weather, wildlife, and human interference. That distinction, most of it explainable, a residue that isn't, is the honest, grounded version of this story, and it's also the more interesting one because it means the mystery isn't built on exaggeration. It's built on a genuine, narrow, stubborn gap in the data. That gap is exactly what caught the attention of people far outside a private research institute. In 2007, a U.S. Department of Defense program called the Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Applications program, commonly referred to as AOSAP, was quietly funded through the Defense Intelligence Agency. Robert Bigelow's aerospace company was awarded the contract to run it, and among the sites the program investigated, according to information that later became public through government disclosures and interviews with people directly involved, was Skinwalker Ranch itself. This is not speculation or internet rumor. The existence of this program, its funding, and its connection to Bigelow's companies has been confirmed through official channels and later folded into broader public discussion of U.S. government interest in unidentified aerial phenomena, the topic now more commonly referred to in official language as UAP. In the years since, some of the scientists who worked under related government-linked programs studying these topics have gone on the record in interviews and congressional testimony describing encounters with technology and phenomena they could not explain using known physics or known adversarial capabilities. That is an extraordinary thing to have happened in official testimony, and it's worth sitting with. This is not a fringe claim confined to online forums. It has, in various forms, reached the halls of the United States Congress. Now, more recently, a new phase of research has begun, this time with public visibility. Following a change in ownership, the ranch has been the subject of an ongoing documented investigation involving a rotating team of scientists, including aerospace engineers and physicists with backgrounds in defense research, some of whom previously worked on official government programs studying unidentified phenomena. Their work has been partially chronicled through a long-running documentary series, which, while produced for entertainment, has also served as one of the more sustained public records of a scientific team returning again and again to the same patch of land with better instrumentation each season. Members of that team have described across multiple seasons continued instances of equipment malfunction that they were unable to trace to conventional causes, unexplained readings from ground-penetrating radar suggesting underground anomalies whose nature remains undetermined, and repeated encounters with lights and aerial phenomena that behaved, in their own accounts, unlike any aircraft or drone technology they were aware of. It's worth pausing here, again, to be precise about what scientists means in this context, because loose language is where mystery stories usually start to drift from fact into exaggeration. The people involved genuinely hold credentials in physics, aerospace engineering, and defense research. Some genuinely have prior government or military research backgrounds. That is real and verifiable. What is not the same thing is a formal peer-reviewed scientific consensus confirming paranormal activity at the ranch. That does not exist, and no credible scientist involved has claimed that it does. What these researchers have said, specifically and repeatedly, is narrower and in some ways more credible precisely because of how narrow it is. That a persistent minority of what they've documented on this property, using real instruments over real years, remains unexplained by any physical model they currently have access to. That's a genuinely different claim than the ranch is haunted, and it's the one worth actually paying attention to. So why does this keep happening at this specific location and not at the thousands of other ranches scattered across the American West? A few theories have circulated among researchers who've spent time studying the area, and it's worth walking through them honestly, including their weaknesses. The first is geological. The Uinta Basin sits atop a genuinely unusual concentration of natural gas, oil shale, and mineral deposits. And some geologists have proposed that specific underground conditions here could generate localized electromagnetic or even mild luminous effects under the right circumstances, similar to documented but still poorly understood phenomena like earthquake lights, which have been observed and recorded elsewhere in the world before and during seismic activity. This theory has the advantage of being grounded in real, measurable geology, but it does not fully explain reports of structured, controlled seeming lights or physical animal mutilation patterns, which look less like a diffuse natural glow and more like something directed. A second theory, favored by some of the researchers with defense and intelligence backgrounds, is that whatever is happening reflects genuinely advanced non-human technology, whether that means extraterrestrial in origin or some other classification entirely that current science does not have a framework for. This is, by any conventional scientific standard, an extraordinary claim requiring extraordinary evidence, and it's fair to say that evidence at that level does not yet publicly exist. But it's also fair to note that this is now a claim being taken seriously enough by people with real security clearances and real defense research backgrounds that it has shaped actual government funding decisions, which is a very different situation from, say, a claim confined entirely to enthusiast forums with no institutional interest behind it at all. A third, quieter theory worth including, because responsible researchers raise it themselves, is a psychological and environmental one, that a combination of genuine, rare natural phenomena, the isolating effect of remote desert terrain, the power of pre-existing cultural narratives about the land, and ordinary human pattern-seeking under stress has combined over decades to amplify a smaller set of real anomalies into a much larger mythology than the underlying data actually supports. This explanation doesn't require anyone to be lying. It simply proposes that humans are extremely good at building coherent, frightening stories out of a handful of genuinely strange data points, especially when those data points arrive on land that already carries centuries of cultural weight telling you to be afraid of it. None of these three explanations fully closes the case, and that, more than any single dramatic anecdote, is the actual mystery here. This is not a story where nobody has looked closely. This is a story where a genuinely well-resourced, methodologically serious, government-connected research effort has looked closely, repeatedly for nearly 3 decades, with steadily improving instrumentation, and has still not produced a conventional, comprehensive explanation for everything documented on that land. Consider what that convergence actually means, because it's rare in a way that's easy to undersell. Most haunted or cursed locations around the world rely entirely on personal testimony passed down through retelling, with essentially no controlled instrumentation ever involved and no institutional interest beyond entertainment. Skinwalker Ranch is nearly unique in that it has attracted sustained, well-funded, credentialed scientific attention, specifically because the phenomena reported there were considered significant enough to justify that attention in the first place, first through a private research institute staffed by scientists and former intelligence officers, then through an actual Department of Defense program, and now through an ongoing, better-equipped civilian research effort that continues to return to the same unresolved questions season after season. A government does not typically fund classified research into a location purely because of ranch folklore. Something in the initial reports, whatever its ultimate explanation, was compelling enough to justify real institutional money and real institutional attention. And that fact alone sets this location apart from almost any comparable mystery story you'll come across. Government reports have acknowledged in careful bureaucratic language that a genuine subset of investigated cases remains unresolved after ruling out conventional explanations. None of this proves any single dramatic theory correct. But it does mean the honest, current state of affairs is this: a real research effort exists, a real unresolved data set exists, and real people with real security clearances have gone on record saying they don't have a complete explanation. Step back now and look at the whole picture together, because that's where the story earns whatever weight it has. A specific patch of land in a geologically unusual region, already carrying centuries of indigenous spiritual tradition, warning people to stay away from it, purchased specifically for scientific study rather than entertainment, investigated for years using real physical instrumentation by credentialed scientists and former intelligence personnel, folded into an actual classified Department of Defense program, and still, after nearly 3 decades of increasingly sophisticated attention, producing a residue of documented events that nobody involved has been able to fully explain using known physics, known geology, or known technology. Any single piece of that, taken alone, has a plausible conventional explanation. Misidentification explains some of the sightings, but all of it, together, sustained across decades, attracting funding from a private institute, and then an actual government program, and now an ongoing scientific effort, is a different kind of question than a single spooky campfire story. And it's one that the people with the most access to the actual data still haven't been able to close. The scientists who have spoken publicly about their time on the ranch are, by and large, careful people. They are not claiming certainty about what's happening there, and the more credible among them are explicit about that uncertainty rather than selling a conclusion. What they consistently say, instead, is something closer to this: that after years of instrumentation, after ruling out the explanations that would normally close a case like this, a genuine, narrow, and repeatable gap remains. And that gap is precisely why the research hasn't stopped after almost 30 years, why a private institute became a government program, and why that government program eventually became public testimony in front of elected officials whose job is specifically to be skeptical. Maybe the real story of Skinwalker Ranch isn't a monster in the dark or a spaceship overhead. Maybe it's simpler and, in its own way, more unsettling. That after decades of real money, real scientists, and real government interest, one ordinary-looking piece of Utah desert has still not been fully explained. And the people whose entire job was to explain it are the first to admit they haven't finished. If this made you think differently about what unexplained actually means when real institutions are involved, subscribe. Every week, we go looking at the places where the official record itself admits the case isn't closed yet.